Hey, everybody. Welcome to A Voice in the Wilderness. Today I'm here with Pastor Keen, Pastor Ray, better known as Pastor Ray. Most people call you Pastor Ray.
Yeah.
So we are coming to the end of 2020. And it's just been, I'm writing an article for Woods and Water, and I'm writing about, the year of 2020, because by the time it comes out, it'll be January, so it's going to be the new year. And I was just thinking about, this is kind of the concept I'm writing about. We say hindsight's 2020, which is perfect vision, and the year was 2020, and so I'm just the whole concept is, what are we going to learn from 2020? That's kind of where my mind's been for the last couple of days is, and I think about, and this is kind of the direction I'm going with that is, when you look back through Scripture, you can go through just the entire Old Testament especially, and you just see where the nation of Israel would get to a good place, and then they would turn from God and they would crash.
Yeah.
And then and it just is almost like a roller coaster story of ups and downs for the nation of Israel. And right now, I just feel like we're in a free fall morally in our country.
Right.
And I'm kind of watching, and what I would think, the United States of America kind of heading down that same path, because we're kind of turning as a culture, as a country, and as a government, for the most part, we're kind of pushing away from God. And I'm kind of starting to see some of the consequences of the fact that we're taking him out of school and all the things that we're doing. So that's just kind of been on my heart. And, I know you were just saying before we got on the air that that's kind of where God's got you right now.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
let's kind of see what God does with this and where he takes it, because, like Kaysen said, I had Kaysen Bicknell on here the other day, and he said, I knew you weren't going to tell me what we're going to talk about.
But until right before you got on. That way it's truly from the Lord.
Right.
I have no time to put it togetger.
Yeah. I mean, you know how it is as a pastor. Sometimes I'll, when I preach, I will absolutely just spend hours getting ready.
Yeah.
And I'll walk up and get ready to speak, and God will say,
Go a different direction.
You're not talking about any of that.
Yeah. And
you're just like, man, but it always turns out to be some of the best, the best messages that God's given me. So, but so what's God been laying on your heart, man?
Yeah. So, I saw, sometimes you see like that timeline loop on your Facebook, and I saw one that said, I'm assuming it was talking about our building plan or something, that said 2020, it's going to be the most remarkable year yet, or the best year yet. I'm like, boy, I was like, man, did I miss that one? That must have been some bad pizza. What a year we've had, and so like that got me thinking, and like initially I was like, yeah, man, this year's really stunk. It's been bad. But if you go back and you look, it's not been all bad. It's revealed things inside of us and things about us that we otherwise wouldn't even known. It has revealed identity flaws in the church. It has revealed, cultural issues that we need to work through and address. It has revealed, kind of how we feel about certain things that otherwise sometimes were just kind of glossed over, and things that we knew that we didn't always know. And so like what got me thinking was, a lot of times in life, you were talking about the children of Israel, and that's so fitting because we go back to the same perpetual state, of arriving, falling, declining, repenting, arriving, falling, declining, repenting. And it's the same process over and over and over again. Yep. And when I was thinking about the story, I was thinking about when I was a kid growing up, like my family, my ex-brother-in-law, he used to like to play darts, and he would always tell us, we were like little guys, like, hey, don't play with these darts. These darts are dangerous. They'll hurt you. And of course, what we do, we grab the darts and we're playing with them. And, we're throwing the darts. I mean, just recklessly throwing the darts, not thinking about it. And I floated one in the air, nowhere near the dartboard. And the thing flew in the air and went right into my nephew's shin, like just the dart right into his shin. And it was like, yeah, well, that was my face. That wasn't his face. His face was a little bit different, because he had a dart sticking out of his shin. And, as I was thinking about it, I was laughing about the story, and I was thinking, in life, that's what we do. We throw darts recklessly. And we're trying to hit a mark, but it's just so reckless. And what happens is it winds up causing more chaos in our life because we're just recklessly tossing darts here or there. And really, as a result, causing pain and hurt.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's so true what you're talking about. And that's what I'm talking about in the article. I'm saying, at what point do we learn? You know, what hindsight's 2020. Well, really and truly, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was 2020, we wouldn't be continuously going through these patterns. And when Crystal and I are working with married couples, you know, I'll say, this is like a circle. This circle that you guys are in. I said, you know, there's a behavior that you will do that'll spawn a behavior that he does, and then he acts a certain way that makes you act the way that you acted before, and you guys are in just this perpetual circle.
Yeah.
And I said, it's somewhere along the line, somebody's got to be willing to break the cycle.
Yes.
And do something different so that you can get a different result. And I was sitting with my mentor yesterday. You know, George Kearse's. He's in his mid-70s, and I've been meeting with him for 11 years, and, man, I love this guy. And he was just sitting there, and he was talking to me, and he said, I've got so much to learn. That's what he told me, and I'm just sitting across a desk from him. I'm going, if he's got a lot to learn, I'm in deep trouble, man, because this guy is –
for sure. I
mean, he really is just – he's bathed himself in the Word his whole life, and he has this amazing knowledge of the Word. And when he said that, I thought to myself, man, I'm in for it, man.
Yeah.
If he's got a lot to learn, and I'm only 49, and I've only been walking with the Lord for 11 years, my learning curve is way behind his.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing with so many of us. You know, like we're in this constant state of trying to arrive to a destination that we're never really going to be at.
Right.
You know, like we're always trying to go to that next place, and like you hear someone in their 70s, and I mean, hopefully it don't take us to our 70s to figure that out. Like, hey, there's so much about life and so much about this I don't know. You know, most people, they walk around with this idea that they've got it all figured out, when in reality they don't. And it takes real humility to say what he said, and to say, you know what, there's so much about life I still got to learn. There's so much about people, so much about everything that's going on in my life that I got to learn. And that's kind of what I was thinking about when I was thinking about these reckless darts. That's what we do. Like we're so sure, when I hit my nephew in the shin, I was so sure I was going to hit that board that I just let that thing launch and didn't even care until it went in his shin.
That reminds me of a story, man. I know this is off subject. We'll get back to the subject. But when I was a kid, man, me and my sister were, I think she's 6 years older than me, 8 years. I can't remember. But she's a little bit older than me, and she was on the phone, and I wanted to use the phone. And back then, it wasn't, everybody didn't have a cell phone.
Right, yeah. You had to wait your turn.
Yeah. And so she wouldn't get off the phone, so I shot a rubber band. When she was sitting on the phone, I shot a rubber band, and I think it hit her in the face or the eye or something. And she come after me, and she was bigger than me, man. And we had this kitchen table that was round, and I was faster than her, so I could just keep running around that table, and she couldn't get me. Because if she would have got a hold of me, man, she'd have tore me up. And so we're running around that table, and she stops. And I stop on the other side of it, and I'm looking at her. And she picks up one of these crystal ashtrays that weigh about 15 pounds, man. And she's got it reared up like she's going to throw it at me. And I'm like, oh, my God, that's going to hurt. And she put it down, and she grabbed one of those pair of scissors that are like cast iron, them old black-handled ones, the big long ones. And she grabbed those scissors, and she threw them, and I kind of leaned back and lifted my leg up like trying to protect myself, and they stuck in the side of my calf.
Oh, my mercy.
And big old hole. And my sister Tracy that was babysitting us was watching all of this transpire. She's like, oh, my God, Mom's going to kill me.
That's so funny.
And I think about, this we are so reckless, man. We just even when you're so sold out to being a man of God or a woman of God, it's so easy to continuously get reckless with your decisions. Yeah. And I love the way Paul writes when Paul says you got to take every thought captive, and bring it down to the obedience of Christ. And when you think about the process of taking every thought captive, man, that is such a crazy concept, because we literally have thousands and thousands of thoughts a day.
Yes.
How do you do that? And so the way that I looked at that, I kind of just meditated on that about a month ago. And I'm like, how do you take every thought captive? And then I started thinking about, we are creatures of almost like creatures of habit.
Yeah.
And if we do something enough, it becomes second nature. We don't have to think about it. So if you learn what God's statutes are and you just continue to operate in them over a period of time, you will automatically start making the decisions that line up with the Word.
That's right. And that's the thing. Like when I think about it, I think intentionality. Like that. Most people in their life, like you pastors for a little while, and they come in and they want to have a conversation with you or counsel with you, and you listen to what's going on in their life. Very seldom do they want to address the why. They just want to talk about the what. And really, what makes life changes is addressing the why.
Right.
And the why is that they're not intentional. They're not intentional about their thoughts. They're not intentional about their actions. They're not intentional about the things that they're set out to do. And as a consequence, that's why they find themselves in that perpetual circle that you were talking about, where it's just every day is the same thing, and every decision becomes a reactive decision as opposed to doing, what God has called you to do. And that's why Paul says, take every thought captive, because, what we have to do is be intentional about the things that God has put on us. We have to be intentional about the decisions that we make and the choices that we make. And most important, I think 2020, probably exemplifies this more than anything else, about what we choose to accept as truth.
Right.
Because what happens when you're not intentional, everything that comes at you becomes truth. And sometimes the loudest voice is mistaken for truth, when in reality it's just the loudest voice.
Yeah. I was talking about this in my article. When I was a teenager, just young and coming up, we didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
We didn't have computers. Our phones had cords hooked to them.
On the wall in the kitchen.
Yeah. It cost money to call somebody.
That's right.
So when you were off at college, you didn't have a chance to make that call all the time. You had to write letters. All you young people, you don't know nothing about all this, but it was actually a good thing. So, but anyway, I think about, when we were younger and how there was very, very few people that spoke into my life. There was very few people, like my mom, my dad had passed, my brothers, my sisters, my coaches, and my teachers. And that was pretty much about it, man.
That was the voices of your circle.
Yeah, that was it. That was all I was really listening to. And so you did not get this inundation of voices all around you, because I'm sitting there thinking about, what is it like to be a teenager and you're just kind of trying to figure it all out, and you literally, my favorite football players, I didn't have any idea if they were Democrat or Republican.
Right.
I didn't have any idea whether or not they were taking drugs or drinking. I didn't have it. All I knew was I liked to watch them play football on Sunday. That's it. That was all I knew.
Yeah.
Now whether they like to drink, whether they like to smoke, whether they, what are they partying all the time at the club?
Yeah.
Their opinion politically. Are they, what? Every little detail of what they think, and it influences these people. It influences kids, man. And so that was to me, how does the human mind navigate so many voices like this that we have with social media and the internet now?
Yeah, it's almost impossible. And I think especially for believers, you have to understand that less is more. And that's what I was getting at when I was saying that, like, we accept the loudest voice as being truth, even though there's really no bearing or no truth to it. And what happens is now we become that reckless dart that's just out there doing something. We've all been guilty of this. We hear a piece of information. Now, it doesn't have to be necessarily news, but it could be something that happens in our house, something that happens in our circle. We hear a piece of information. We don't know the whole story. We react to it only to find out later that part of the story wasn't told. Right. And that we've completely missed. And what winds up happening almost 10 out of 10 times when that happens is that we create more chaos, more pain, more hurt in our life and in our circle. And those are reckless darts. They're just reckless darts that we're just throwing out because we're just reacting. And I think the enemy has found a new way to trap people. See, because when we were growing up, the idea of platform was maybe a deck on your porch. People didn't have platforms. The idea of my page, my cause, that made no sense to, that was not even part of our vocabulary, growing up. The idea of being so internationally connected, it was almost a foreign concept. I mean, even as far back as 2002, thinking even with the, internet and all of that, you could have never imagined that in 2020, 2021, that we'd be in the place that we're at. And what has happened is because of all those voices, now truth is really subjective to the person hearing it. It's not what's actually true. It's what you perceive as being true. It's what I perceive as being true. And now truth becomes almost like an objective knowledge, and it causes us to react. And the reason why we're sowing so much pain out there is because we're reckless in our reaction, because we're going from a place of, hey, this is my truth. I literally have had someone tell me this is my truth.
Right.
What does that even mean? like if it's my truth, it's truth. No, that's truth has to be truth in of itself, and even inside the church, we have this idea that somehow we can make truth an objective knowledge. Like it's subjective to the way I see the world, or it's subjective to my experiences. No, truth is truth, and everything else is built around it. And we are going to see, unfortunately, if we don't get a handle on it, we're going to see a whole lot more people in a whole lot worse positions than where they are now, because they're just like that dart, just recklessly flying off at everything that comes their way. They think they're hitting a mark, but they're aiming at the wrong target.
Right. I was thinking about, you're talking about these voices that everybody listens to, and I was thinking about how I didn't care what other people thought, and everybody followers. I think growing up, I had like 12 followers. That was my family.
Yeah,
and I was totally good with that.
Yeah.
But when you start thinking about truth, one of the things that jumps out at me is I think about whenever Jesus was standing in front of Pilate, and Jesus has been captured by this time. He's being tried for crimes that he actually didn't do anything. He didn't commit any crimes according to the law. And then he stands in front of Pilate, and Pilate's wife has already told him, hey, don't mess with this guy. I've had a dream. It's not a good thing. Don't mess with him. And then Pilate's standing right in front of Jesus, and he's asking him, are you the king of the Jews, and all that kind of stuff. And he actually says this question. He says, what is truth?
Yeah.
And I think about that statement, and I think about the fact that the truth was standing right in front of him. The truth.
Yeah.
The truth that lived the truth out on this planet, that lived the perfect life, that never committed sin, that never did anything harmful to human beings, that the truth stood right in front of his face.
Yeah.
And he did not recognize it. And he didn't recognize it because he wasn't looking for it.
Yeah.
He said he was looking for truth.
But he wasn't.
But he wasn't looking for truth. And that's the thing I think sometimes about when I work with couples. Sometimes I'll tell them, I say, do you want me to agree with your perspective, or do you really want to make things better?
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, but I kind of think that you just want me to take your side.
Right.
And I'm not on nobody's side.
Yeah.
I'm on Jesus' side. I want your marriage to be healed. And the reality is that there's enough issues that you've got to deal with and she's got to deal with. If you'll focus on your own issues, you won't pay no attention to the other one's issues.
True story.
So for me, it's like truth is you got to have a well that you draw from.
Yeah.
When it comes to truth, you got to have a foundation that you build on when it comes to your truth. And just like you said, everybody's trying to find truth in all kind of different things now.
Right.
And they don't want to go into the Word and let the Word be the foundation of where they dig their truth from.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part, is because if you don't have a well of truth to draw from, you're in trouble, man, because then anything can be truth to you.
Absolutely. And that's where we're at. That's what it is. Because what happens is I have certain ideologies that, maybe they were put inside of me because of the way I was raised, or maybe it's just because, or maybe I chose them because of the way I was raised and I want to be opposite of that. And now, because of technology and the information age, I can literally set the parameters and the filters of what's true in my life. And it's so sad because you see this a lot. You work with young people, so I'm 100% correct in this. You see this so much in young people that they're so passionate about a cause that they have no information about.
Right.
They're so passionate about something, and their passion is admirable and it's amazing, but they're passionate without information. And so ignorance with action only causes destruction.
Right.
And they don't have any cognitive understanding about the things that they're talking about. I'll give you a case in point. I was talking to a young person, and they were talking about the minimum wage increase that's going to happen in the state of Florida. And they were talking about like restaurants, and they're like, well, they use McDonald's. They said, well, the McDonald's Corporation can afford it. I'm like, you're 100% correct. The McDonald's Corporation can afford it. But the McDonald's Corporation doesn't own the McDonald's that you eat at. A local guy who probably owns 2 or 3 McDonald's own them because they buy franchises. The McDonald's Corporation buys property and then turns around subleases that property back out to small business owners. That's how it works. They make their money off the real estate, not off the brand. They're not actually making their money off the burger that you buy, and his understanding, not that the young man was wrong, but he didn't have a full knowledge of the truth of what he was speaking about.
Right.
And his passion was admirable, but it's misguided. Now that's something simple. Now you take something that could impact generations. You take something like your salvation or your walk with Christ or any of those things, you find yourself in a place where you see a whole generation of people who are passionately active without any knowledge whatsoever. And they are reckless darts. And if we as the church, because we can address like, okay, this is where we're at. But if we as the church don't recognize the damage that reckless darts cause, and as leaders, how we change that, and change, okay, where do we go from here? How do we get the dart, because it's going to fly through the air, how do we get it on target? How do we get to hitting that bullseye and get to where we're going? Well, we've got to get absolute truth to them.
Well, I think that what you're talking about, man, this is something just came to my heart whenever you were talking about that. I think that's one of the reasons why we're having so much of a struggle in the church right now of losing so many people to the world.
Yeah.
Because every year we have more and more teenagers and more people walk away from the faith. And you just see this percentage dwindling down of people who say that they identify with Christianity and stuff like that. But this is something I think is so crucial. Reckless darts. Reckless dart. And here's an example to me of a reckless dart. A human being that says that they believe that Jesus is the Son of God, but they never take the time to gain the wisdom that the Bible has to offer.
Absolutely.
And this is what happens. They go out into the world. They say, I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. I love Jesus. And they behave much like the world, and they spend a lot of their time in the world. Mm-hmm. And when other people look at them, they're like, wait a minute. I see how you're behaving and how you're acting and what you're doing and the way that you're treating people, but you keep telling me that you're a Christian and you're not looking any different than anybody else that I've got around me. That's a reckless dart, because if you don't understand the importance that a lot of people in this world, like if you're a believer and you're watching this podcast and you're listening to this podcast, I want you to understand that your life may be the only gospel that some people ever hear. They may never look at a Bible. They may never go into a church. They may never be. May never have the gospel actually spoken to them. But them allowing you in their life might be the only time they ever see a semblance of Jesus. And I also want to tell people out there right now that have been hurt by church people or been hurt by churches, I want to tell you this. Please do not make the mistake of looking to me to see what it's like to be Jesus.
Yeah.
Don't look to me, because I am a human and I'm just like everybody else. I'm working on me full time, and I'm trying to keep myself in check when it comes to the way that I'm taught in Scripture to live. When you think and you want to learn about Jesus, the Bible is where you look. Don't look to me. You look to the life of the one that lived it, because I'm going to fail you every time. And that, to me, that was the hardest part about being a pastor, was because I wanted to do life with my congregation. I didn't want to just be up there and act like I was this guy that had it all pulled together. I actually wanted to do life, and I was willing to talk about my flaws with them. And that was probably the biggest problem I had with my congregations was it was hard for them to accept the fact that they were being led by a man that was having, that was basically struggling with life just like they are.
That was in the same place.
Right.
Yeah. The challenge, is that we have found ourselves in a place of assimilated Christianity. So, like people come and they see, they don't come and do.
Right.
And so because they come and see, there's very little relationship. And because there's very little relationship, now there's this idea of what you should be. So they don't look at you as a broken man. Now they look at you as, okay, if you're the one teaching, you should be the master of all things. Well, when it comes to this, you'll never master it. Like your friend said, you're still learning at 74 years old. You're never going to master it. When we master it, we'll walk into heaven.
Right.
If we get to that point, we're going to walk into heaven. You'll never master it. And so and we created this model, not me and you specifically, and not even leaders right now, just over time, because what one generation excuses, the next will abuse. We've created this idea of assimilated Christianity that, if you come and assimilate, I will tell you what truth is, and then you do your best to live it out in your life. And it created like this us and them. Well, the problem is, there were so many other voices, so much other information that has been inundated over the last 20 years. So let me give you an example of what I'm trying to say here. 20 years ago, you take a church that had 1,000 members and adherents. Their average Sunday attendance was 774. That was 1,000 people called that church their home. They were averaging 774 people on a Sunday. The reason why is because most people went to church 3 to 4 times a month. 20 years removed, that same exact church that has 1,000 members, their average Sunday attendance, 430, 440, because the paradigm is shift. Now, most people go 1 time a month. Why? Because it's not where they're getting truth from.
Right.
Because they're getting information from everywhere else that they say, and so they tell themselves, whether it's conscious or subconscious, that's not an avenue of truth that I need in my life. And so since it's not an avenue of truth that I need in my life, I can fill that time slot with something that's more effective for my life, whether it's rest, whether it's going off with my family, whether it's going golfing, whether it's whatever, you insert whatever it is, but you're turning that volume of truth out from your life, and you're putting other information in, and that's leaders' fault, because we've created this idea of assimilated Christianity that if you come, I'll tell you the truth. Jesus' movement grew not because he told, but because he did.
That's right.
He walked with them. They saw it. They experienced it. So as leaders, if we want to stop reckless darts from happening next year and the year beyond and the year beyond that, not saying that we can't preach our messages. We got to preach our messages. We got to use avenues like this. We got to use whatever vehicle, whatever tools available, to get someone to hear and to see. But what we've got to do is also start doing. We got to start walking it out with people who don't see life the same way we do.
Yeah.
Who don't see things from the same perspective that we do. We've got to be that shin that takes one of those reckless darts every now and then. Yeah. And it's going to hurt. And there's going to be some pain that comes along with that. But we've got to be willing to say, you know what? I'm going to take the brunt of that reckless dart because I'm going to help them get on the bullseye. And the only way you're going to do that is to actually get down there with them, because people won't hear. Truth is going to stay relative to their perspective until you change their perspective. So the only way they're going to hear what we have to say is not by the message we preach, but by the life we live out in front of them, the relationship that we have with them, the willingness to say, even though you're vastly different than me, I'm not going to create a divide that says us and them.
Right.
We're all the same. Your brokenness might not look like my brokenness, but we're still broken.
Yeah, and that's so cool, because I love the way you put that, because with this political environment that we're in right now, do you know I've had brothers and sisters in Christ that have actually removed their I don't know if they blocked me, but they've taken me off their Facebook because they don't agree with the views I have politically.
Right.
And I'll message it on my, look, there's no view that you can have outside of not believing Jesus is the Son of God that's going to cause me an issue with you.
Yeah.
And that's really not going to cause me an issue, but that's just going to make me want to help you understand it.
Yeah.
But we've gotten to a place to where not only is truth subjective to the loudest voice in your life, but we've also gotten to a place to where if you don't agree with me, I'll turn it off. I can't hang with you anymore. And look, That's just, I don't even understand that concept because it's the diversity that makes America so great.
Right.
To me, when I look around and I coach a football team and there's several different nationalities or several different kind of kids, it's actually a blessing in my eyes. And I remember one time when I was working at the school, we had a chapel, and I think we had 5 exchange students, and all of them were from different areas and spoke different languages.
Wow.
And so I had each one of their languages printed up with the message that Peter preached at Pentecost when they were speaking in tongues and they were speaking in other languages. And I handed them all out to all of them, and I moved them all around in the sanctuary. And I said, when I say go, I want you all to read that out loud, like we can really hear you out loud. So we can see what it was like to be at Pentecost when everybody was speaking all these different languages and sharing the gospel. Man, it was one of the most moving experiences I've ever had in ministry in my entire life. It was just, I mean, it was one of those supernatural things like a foot washing or a baptism or something like that. It was one of those, just you could feel the supernatural power of God when this was going on. And I was thinking, this was just a little tiny sliver of what it was probably like to hear all these different voices and all these different dialects saying, hey, Jesus is the Son of God. And so for me, I don't worry about a difference of opinion in worldly stuff. I really don't. The only thing I'm concerned about is, do you understand Jesus died for you? Do you understand that he loves you, that he wants to see victory in your life?
That's our absolute truth.
Yeah, that's my core. That's my core. And it's like I tell people,
it's the foundation for us.
Right. I'll draw a circle sometimes when I'm talking to people, and I'll say, how much of the knowledge of God do you feel like you've attained? Imagine this being, full of the knowledge of God. It's got all the knowledge of God, and how much have you gained at this point? And when you start thinking about it like that, I mean, maybe a little dot with a pen, and I'll put that dot in the middle, and then I'll draw just a little cross in it, and I'll say, the only thing that I know for sure that I've got right is the fact that Jesus died on that cross so that I can be set free.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stay focused on that.
And that's what matters. For me, one of the biggest stories in the Bible that comes to my mind when I talk about reckless darts or think about reckless darts with people is the woman at the well.
Right.
So this woman was a reckless dart in her society. She would, if you don't know the story, I'll help you out. She wasn't with her husband. She was with her live-in boyfriend. She had been through several men. She was pretty much an outcast in her society. She probably had a reputation about her. That's the reason why she was getting water at the noon hour by herself instead of in the morning with the rest of the women. And Jesus is coming along, and he decides, I have to go to Samaria. Now,
I love that he said I had to go.
I had to go. Yeah. And not I wanted to go, not we should go. He's like, I got to go. And historically speaking, this was an issue of racism.
Right.
The children of Israel considered them dogs. They did not want to be around them. They didn't want to have anything to do with them. They considered them less than themselves. And so they would go out of their way to go around Samaria because they didn't want to be anywhere near Samaria. So here's this woman spending her life throwing these reckless darts. Nobody's coming to help her. I'm sure in her relationships, she was causing pain in other people's lives too. It wasn't just her who was suffering. Hurt people.
That's right.
So I'm sure the Bible doesn't really go into detail about it, but I'm sure she was causing pain in other people's lives. So here she is. And what I think is remarkable about the story, because a lot of times we talk about her issue, but we don't never really point out the people who were supposed to know better's issue.
Right.
Jesus told them he was hungry. He sent them on busy work because he knew they couldn't handle it.
Right.
Sometimes we're so busy doing things that don't matter, quote unquote, for the kingdom, that we can't really do the thing that really does matter because Jesus knows we can't handle it.
No.
And so he sends us to, so he goes to Samaria and he comes to Jacob's well. So literally this is where life is drawn because water is life. It's necessity for living. So here is life standing right next to where she thinks life comes from, and not really understanding, like, she's got her idea of the truth, and her truth was wrapped around her pain and the fact that she wasn't even supposed to be having a conversation with this guy because of their social and cultural differences. And her first response to him is, aggressive, and it is defensive, and it's everything that anyone who's a reckless dart is going to be. Right. She was absolutely sure she was right, absolutely sure he was wrong, and was bound and determined to put him in his place. But through his conversation, he began to show her about herself. Not in a way where he pointed out her flaws, but he began to show her about her struggles, about her identity, and about what she really wanted in life and how she wasn't achieving it. And he loved her through a conversation. He loved her through basically walking out her journey a little bit with her in the context of this conversation. And here is life sitting on top of what she thought life really was.
Right.
And here at this moment, she finally gets it. She has this aha moment with him. And of course, here comes the disciples right on cue.
Right.
Because that's how it works. There's always someone who's more concerned about what side you're on versus where you're at in your journey. And so here comes the disciples right on cue. And they're thinking to themselves, and none of them's got the courage to actually say it out loud. Why is he talking to this woman? Why is he alone with this woman? Of all people, a Samaritan. Why is he even, what has he done? Has he lost his mind? And I love the next line. Jesus basically tells him he ain't hungry anymore. And just sent him on a day's journey for no reason. But what's remarkable about that woman is she goes back and she really becomes the first evangelist.
Right.
Because she starts telling people in Samaria, I have met the Messiah. Come discover the man who told me everything about myself.
Yeah.
He changed her truth, and it changed the direction of that dart. It went from being a place of recklessness to now being a place of intentionality. And she began bringing people to the truth instead of causing pain with her life. And if our lives are the darts, the bullseye is always Jesus.
Always.
It's got to be Jesus. And, for a pastor or, for, a leader, I know you say, oh yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. It's always Jesus. I know it might sound like the cliche Christian answer, but it's always Jesus. He is the absolute truth. And he is the only one that can take you from being in a place where you're a reckless dart to being an effective on target dart. You're throwing something. Where it's going is really where you focus your truth at.
Right. Well, you talking about the woman at the well, and something I love about that story, and thank God that John recorded that story, because nobody else, there's 4 gospels and he's the only one that records it, he was common for that, but commonly known for that. But one of the things I think about in that story is the fact that, can you imagine what the looks on the disciples' faces were like whenever they showed up?
Yeah.
And how she must have felt when she received those looks. But this was the thing about it. You were talking about how water was life back in that time. Yeah. It was life for them because it was such a desert hot.
Yeah.
And this is something I thought about. She left her pot. It makes a point to say that she left her water pot at the well, her life source. She left sitting there, went back into town, and picked people and got people and brought them back to Jesus to hear the gospel. And I thought about, when I was thinking about that one day, I was thinking about Elijah. I know this is kind of a different story. Elijah, when he goes up on the Mount Carmel and they're up there and he builds the 2 altars, and you get the false god of Baal, and then he builds the altar for the God of Jacob.
Yeah.
And so he says, dig a trench. And he said, don't just dig a trench. I want you to pour water all over mine.
Yeah.
And this is the first thing I thought about was, where in the world did he get water on top of a mountain? Yeah. Now, this is the coolest part about that to me. I believe the water that he put on that had to come from the people that had went up there to see the showdown.
Yeah.
And this was water that if they didn't have,
it was scarce. Yeah.
They weren't going to make it back home because it was a long journey and they had to have it to live.
Yeah.
Now, it had not rained for years.
Right. They were in the middle of a drought.
And Elijah's looking at those that believe and saying, I need your water to prove that our God is our God. And so these people had to step out in faith.
Yes.
To give him the water that he asked for to put on that sacrifice. And when you start thinking about these little details of how important water was, and how important that pot was to her, and how important that water was to those on the mountain with Elisha. And you start thinking about the sacrifice that people made in these areas and the things that they did. You only do that when you taste the truth. When you taste the real truth, you're willing to do whatever. It doesn't make any difference, because you're like, okay. And that's the thing, that all that's going on in our country. I was talking to some young people at a school today, and I said, talk to me about what's going on in y'all's heart right now. And all of them, I'm just scared to death. I'm just afraid. It's just fear, fear, fear. And I gave them the verse of in Timothy where it says, God did not give us a spirit of fear, but power of love and sound mind. And I told them, I said, listen to me. I said, you've got to get to the foundation of your source. Your source is Jesus.
Yeah.
And this is the reality. I've never heard anybody. I've been in ministry for, I don't know, probably close to 9 years now. Mm-hmm. I've never heard anybody say anything close to this. Hey, man, I won the lottery. I bought my second house in Aruba, and I met Jesus.
Yeah.
I had never heard that. But I have heard stories about people being broken.
Yes.
People being at the bottom. People being hurt. People being ill. Things that are, when they feel like they have no hope, and you have an opportunity to hear their testimony, almost always it's a place of desperation where they meet Jesus. And I tell people all the time that no matter what goes on in our country, no matter where we're going, no matter if it doesn't go the way that we want it to go, brokenness always brings people to Christ.
Yeah.
And if I have to go through whatever to see a mass group of people repent and come to the knowledge of Jesus so they can find the true source of happiness and truth, so be it.
That's right. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm just, either you're in or you're out. I tell people all the time, I'm a black and white guy. I'm in or out. If I'm in, I'm all in. I'm going to give you everything I got. If I'm not,
I'm moving on.
I'm going to something I can be all in on.
That's right.
And when I think about this, we talk about this reckless starts and these things like this, man, I just want to encourage everybody out there that there is a truth.
Yes.
There is a source that you can dig from. There is a wisdom. I was picking up my deer meat today from my processor, and this guy used to be a preacher, and he said, man, I'm fixing to make a big decision, and I really need prayer. Will you pray for me, man? Because, I wear my Jesus hats everywhere and all that kind of stuff, and I wasn't wearing this one today. I was wearing my toboggan back here. It's got Jesus on it. And I sat there and I said, you know what? Why don't we pray right now? I said, let me tell you what it says in James.
Yeah.
It says that if we ask for wisdom, he will give it to us freely.
Yes.
Let me tell you what it says in Ephesians. He says that he's got good works for you and that he's prepared everything you need. And I started naming these verses off. And in Jeremiah, it says that he has great plans for you. And all you're doing, man, is you're pointing people to truth. Truth. Right. You're taking those darts, those truth darts, and you're going bullseye, 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 bullseye. Because I'm going to tell you, whenever you start throwing those verses out at people, people are like, I didn't even know the Bible said that, man. Yeah. I didn't even know. Let me tell you something. You guys are listening out there. You have no idea how much Christ loves you. You have no idea how much he can help you. You have no idea how much he can change your life. I promise you right now, people say, how do you stay so excited? Because I live from glory to glory as a believer. It's always seems to be getting better. No matter how much adversity comes my way, it still seems to always work to make things even better and make things even closer to where I need them to be so I can reach people for the kingdom. So I love the word that you've had today, man. I love to talk about this kind of stuff, and I love what God's laying on your heart. And I tell you, man, I'm excited about your building, man. I know you're building a building. These guys, I just want to mention that real quick before we hop off the podcast that you guys, so tell us a little bit about your build, man, before we go.
Yeah. So, God has been so good to us. We were able to actually purchase our property in 2017. We had a piece of property and we had a building on it, and we've, praise the Lord, we've maxed out that building. We've literally knocked down every wall that we could that wasn't structural to continue to accommodate growth and space. And, we're just out of space. So we knew it was time to do something. And so we went and through the process of starting, actually we were supposed to be done with the building by now, but because of everything that happened in 2020, we just kind of slowed the roll a little bit to make sure that, see what was going to happen. And, now we're back at it full force, so we're getting ready to add 2,500 square feet to our existing property, which is going to be absolutely remarkable. I jokingly say this, but it's so true. Since we planted the church in 2015, every place that we've been at that we've had to rent, or even the place that we've bought, it's had ugly carpet. Like the carpet's just been atrocious. And, I am a little anal, but not to the point to where it's, crazy, as far as like aesthetics. I think aesthetics are important, but I'm excited, of course, that lives are going to be changed in the building, but brother, I can't wait to have some nice new carpet. Like just to have some good
Man,
carpet.
there's been a lot of churches collapse because of carpet.
I've already got it in my mind. It's not even up for discussion.
Yeah. I tell you, I've seen some crazy stuff with all that, man, in churches. But man, so tell them how to get in touch with you guys, so that if they want to come to church, they can check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. You can always give us a call. Our church phone number is 386-200-9197. Check us out online. Our website's www.connectinglakecity.com. Our address is 771 Southwest Thomas Terrace. We're on the west side of Lake City, 2.5 miles from I-75. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, all of the social media platforms. We'd love for you to be a part of what we're doing. We're a growing church. We're reaching people. We're community-driven church. We believe in helping people set that dart on the bullseye. So that's what really what we're about. People are our passion, and we make no mistakes or make no apologies. We make no apologies for reaching people, reaching lost people, and we don't believe that no mistake is beyond God's repair. So we'd love for you to come check us out, be a part of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's the truth, man. And you know what? I'm excited to see what God does with this new building. So anyway, if you want to find out more about FCA or the ministry that God's called me and my wife to, you can go to fcaod.org. That's fcaod.org, as in outdoors. And if you would, click and subscribe so you can get a reminder whenever we have a video show up. And if you would, share the video, man, because we're all about reaching people for the gospel. And if this is a platform God's given us to be able to reach people, and the more people that listen to the podcast, hopefully the more people that'll find out about the truth of Jesus Christ. So if you would, man, just click on it, share it, and let other people know what we got going on. So we just want to tell you thank you. Hey, it's your decision. Make the decision wisely. We just want to tell you we love you. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, and we will see you later.
Thank you for listening to A Voice in the Wilderness podcast with Skipper Hare. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. You can also learn more about FCA Outdoors by going to fcaod.org. Check out the Woods and Water magazine, which comes out once a month. Skipper writes an exciting article for FCA Outdoors. You can pick them up in most convenience stores in the Southeast region. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel Hair Days-Uncut to follow all the podcasts from Skipper and his friends.